Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Untitled Conversations. This is our third episode, and it's going to be on mental health. I'm Zara Ahmed. I'm this year's Equity Ambassador's Executive Committee member, and I'd like to thank you all for coming so much. I did want to say, if you guys are here for that English credit or NHS point, at the end we will have a QR code which you guys can scan to verify that you attended this event. Now I'm going to toss this to Ms. Beeland, who will be introducing you.
Thank you. So like she said, my name is Jody Beeland, and I am one of the school counselors here at Deep Run High School. This is my first year here at Deep Run, and my alpha is O through SHAN. And to my left, this is Bob Nichols. He is the Mental Health Services Program Manager at Child Savers. And Child Savers is a nonprofit here in Richmond, and they focus on interventions for early childhood and mental health for children and families to help them through some of the most critical moments in their lives. And he oversees a clinical staff that is actually embedded in 3 different high schools around the area: Huguenot High School, Hopewell, and John Marshall. So we're really thankful to have you be here and be a part of our panel today. And the rest of these folks that you see up here on stage, Sarah's already introduced herself. This is Fiona Chan, this is Mitala Mohammed, and down at the very end is Rahima Perez. So we thank you guys for being here and being a part of this uncomfortable conversation. So I just definitely wanted to give you all a warning that some of the content that we're going to talk about today is sensitive. And so that can be some of the things we may talk about, including mental illness, suicide. That can be triggering for some folks, and we just want to acknowledge that. And if it's not sitting right with you and you need to leave, that is okay. If you want somebody to talk to, the counselors are in Wildcat Corner during this time, so feel free to get up and leave if you need to. Okay, now for participation from the audience. We're going to do myth or fact. I'm turning it over to the girls.
Okay, so the first one, if I am under 18 years old, I cannot seek out and or receive mental health services or help without my parents' or guardians' consent. Raise your hand if you think it's a fact. Raise your hand if you think it's a myth. That's right.
Good job, everybody.
In order for a person's anxiety to be classified as an anxiety disorder, the anxiety they're experiencing must be long-lasting, severe, and interfering with the person's way of life. Raise your hand if you think it's a fact. Raise your hand if you think it's a myth. It's a fact.
Yeah, so Ms. Beal might be chiming in on some of these. Just in case you're curious about either of these first two, you can sign yourself in, you can seek mental health support as young as 13 in Virginia, but your guardian has the right to decline services or change your treatment plan, that kind of thing. In most cases, most mental health professionals will want to work with your family just so you're getting wraparound support, not just from one person. And then I think the way we use anxiety is kind of confusing. That term can be a symptom of a bigger problem, or it can be an anxiety disorder. So that's some of the tricky part about this point.
The third one is adolescent girls are more likely to experience depression than adolescent boys are. Raise your hand if you think it's a fact. Raise your hand if you think it's a myth. It's actually a fact.
So it's a fact only because this takes the person to report whether or not they're experiencing depression. And therefore, oftentimes, people who identify as female tend to express their emotions more, tend to seek out help more. That does not mean that they actually are a higher number, because both boys, girls, no matter how you identify, you can have mental illness. It doesn't discriminate.
If you ask a person about his or her suicidal intentions, you will encourage that person to kill themselves. Raise your hand if you think it's a fact. Raise your hand if you think it's a myth.
You're
It's a
right.
myth.
It's a myth. If you ask somebody about their suicidal intentions, you're not putting ideas in their minds. They may already have them, and you asking gives them an opportunity to share what's really going on with them and gives them an opportunity to get the help that they need.
Around 8% of youth between the ages of 9 to 17 years old have an anxiety disorder in any given year. Raise your hand if you think it's a fact. Raise your hand if you think it's a myth. It's actually a fact.
I think that it would be interesting to know what that statistic is now, post-COVID, because that definitely has impacted all of us in ways. So it would be interesting to me to know if that number has actually increased since COVID.
Self-harm is a failed suicide attempt. Raise your hand if you think it's a fact. Raise your hand if you think it's a myth. That's right.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about this kind of topic later in the presentation, but there are lots of ways that people use self-harm to cope with really high stress. We would say it's not a positive coping mechanism. It might help in an immediate moment, but it makes things more complicated long-term, and it's eroding some of your long-term coping skills and skill sets in terms of your personal resilience. But it doesn't always have to be connected to suicide. Something for a while we got wrong in the mental health field was that we were looking at everything through a suicide lens because of liability and insurance and other people's concerns for safety. And we were losing some of the nuance about what shows up for people who are under a lot of suffering or a lot of stress. So they can be different, and that's a conversation to have with people like Ms. Beeland or a mental health professional.
The next one is, of the 2.8 million youth aged 12 to 17 years old who experienced at least one major depressive episode in the past year, less than half received treatment. Raise your hand if you think it's a fact. Raise your hand if you think it's a myth.
That is a fact, and unfortunately, there are not enough service providers to help all those that are struggling with their mental health. But that is true. The other thing is if you are suffering and you are experiencing depression, which is sadness that lasts longer than 2 weeks, and there's other signs of that going on in your life, you really need to speak up and ask for that help. And you can do that with your family, trusted adults. You can do that here at school with a teacher or your school counselor. But the first step in getting help is to share what's really going on with you, because unfortunately we can't read minds, and unless you tell someone, you may struggle in silence.
The last one is, the best way to help someone experiencing anxiety is to remind them to toughen up and remind them that what they are anxious about is nothing to be afraid of. Raise your hand if you think it's a fact. Raise your hand if you think it's a myth.
That is a myth, for sure. When you have a friend that may be having a panic attack or having severe anxiety, I think one of the best things to do is just ask them, what can I do for you in this moment? Because different things work for different people. So for some people that may be physical touch, or it can be muscle relaxation, or if you have access to ice cubes, putting ice cubes in your hands, or it's just having somebody talk to them about any random topic that they can think of. But I think asking the person what you can do for them is the best thing to do.
Yeah, I would add to that, Ms. Beeland, that I think two of the things we really don't want to do when we're experiencing a high level of anxiety are to tell folks that their feelings aren't valid, because that will probably encourage them to take on more tasks, to take on more responsibilities, to just try to push through, or to tell folks to toughen up. A lot of times when we are experiencing anxiety, what we most need is to take a minute, take a breath, and not try to do more. So sometimes when we're encouraging people to just like keep going and tough it out, we may actually be doing harm for our friends.
So here we have our school survey results, and these are the top 5 stressors. So the number one stressor at Deep Run is homework with 91%, and then self-image has 51.7%, and then extracurricular activities have 39.4%, peer pressure has 32.5%, and work has 28.3%.
So additionally, from the survey that you guys took in the last 2 weeks, we also identified the top coping strategies amongst you all. The first one was listening to music, so it was music alone or with people kind of tends to like take your mind off of things. Second was exercise, going outside or going to the gym, stuff like that. And talking to your friends and family, so having a support system around you. And creating to-do lists to like organize yourselves. And then lastly, meeting with your counselor. Additionally, you guys also gave us some positive coping strategies, and we wanted to add those in the presentation. So some of them are supportive friends, family, and teachers, which is really lining up with that whole having people to talk to and just being around people that can make you feel comfortable. Having a consistent daily routine, which is more of like having that organization, so kind of lining up with the to-do list activities. Positive extracurricular activities, kind of engaging in more activities that will make you feel happier and just feel positive as a person. Having an awareness of your resources, so knowing who you can contact or where you can go for help. Feeling in control, meaning having that consciousness that you are stronger than your emotions and you can control them, and just feeling calm with yourself if you ever feel in a way that's kind of harming you. High self-esteem kind of goes along with that. Just feeling stronger about yourself and having more confidence can also help. Emotional regulation skills, so maybe independently having the ability to control your emotions when necessary, or know how to take care of certain emotions that you may experience. Lastly is spirituality, so religion, if you guys are strongly connected to that, does help with people kind of staying consistent or just having a routine to stick to. And if Ms. Beeland or Bob want to add to anything?
I think that's a really good list that you all came up with.
Sure, I'll add one thought. I think it's interesting when the poll results were shared from the Deep Run student community about your favorite coping strategies. A lot of those involve stress, like to-do lists or exercise. And I think it's important to point out that stress itself is not bad, but we all have kind of a limit of how much stress is good for us, like a deadline might help me get something done, and how much stress becomes like toxic or too much or overwhelming. So I think what we saw in some of those coping strategies are ways to like use stress in a positive way. So just want to like highlight that word stress can go either way for us.
Okay, so these are risk factors that can increase the likelihood of someone struggling with mental health. Negative family environment, conflict with family or friends, bullying, low self-esteem, alcohol and drug use, traumatic events, violence, poverty, academic stress, lack of supportive adults, and lack of community engagement. And for the one that says like conflict with friends or family, if you have like a toxic relationship with like a friend, for example, it can be really hard to like break out of that cycle because either you want to be there for them or they want to be there for you. But within that like relationship, they end up just lowering like your mental health, and sometimes it's like draining to try to help someone when you yourself struggle.
I think one thing to remember about the risk factors is that if you look at that list and you're like, oh, I've got 3 out of 4, 3 out of however many there are, it doesn't mean that you will struggle with your mental health. It just says you're at a higher risk for that. So being intentional about how are you taking care of yourself and how are you taking care of your mental health is really important to stay healthy. I think one thing to remember
is mental health, we all have it. If you have a brain, you have mental health. And so really being intentional about how you take care of yourself. So here's our first question, and these questions all came from the survey as well. What happens when anxiety, stress, and fear are your main motivators for school? So any of the students want to talk about that? We're leaving it to the experts, Bob.
Be differential, y'all.
Yeah.
We want to give you the mic first. And all these questions.
Exactly.
So a lot of students are very stressed out with school, and sometimes you can use that as a motivator. Like if you're really stressed out about something, that like adrenaline kind of like keeps you going. And if you're like trying to complete a project and the due date is coming up, and you're constantly like working and stuff. And at the moment, you're like, okay, like I'm gonna get this done because I'm so stressed out. But very soon it will start to drain you like really fast, and that's going to affect not just like your school life, but also like life at home and at work, with your relationships in general, because you'll get so tired and you don't really want to interact with people. You put off your work, you'll get behind, and sometimes you don't do as well in school because you're just so exhausted from trying to catch up or do well. And a lot of the time at school, it's competitive. Like people want to get better grades than you, or getting to good schools, or like even sports. Like they want to be the best that they can be. But it definitely takes a toll on yourself.
I'll just chime in. I thought that was really eloquently put from an experiential side. Some of the science on these feelings of anxiety, stress, and fear in particular have evolved to keep us alive. So if I'm anxious about, a saber-toothed tiger coming and eating my baby, then that anxiety, that fear is going to help me take precaution and be very careful, leaving my caveman babies on a rock somewhere where a saber-toothed tiger could eat them. The problem is, we've evolved for a really high-threatening environment with a lot of risks, because humans are very vulnerable. We don't have scales or armor that we're born with. But we still have those today when we're in a pretty low-risk environment. Deep Run High School is a very safe space for folks to be. Metro Richmond, the families, our households, mom's house, dad's house, whoever, generally are pretty safe places for us, but we still have the emotional responses. So if there's a deadline or a text and we don't know the sender, something as small as that might make me say, oh gosh, who is this? I don't know who this is. I don't know how to tell them, but I don't have them in my contacts, but I don't know if I'm being spammed. If we have some of that saber-toothed tiger reaction, that survival reaction, part of what that does for us is it starts to erode our sense of safety. And when we think about school and some of the stressors that were on the slide earlier, those are also opportunities like homework, extracurriculars. Those are also opportunities to build resilience. Maybe it improves my self-esteem or my sense of mastery. But when survival feelings are my only motivations to be in school, then I'm missing an opportunity to feel proud, oh, I got a good grade. Oh, I'm just relieved that I survived. And so instead, these emotions can start to erode our sense of self instead of building our sense of self.
Why is it so hard for people to understand mental illness?
I think it's hard for people to understand mental illnesses because before COVID, we were never really taught about mental illnesses, and many people who did have depression or anxiety didn't know what they were dealing with. But I feel like after the pandemic, people started normalizing mental illnesses talks. I also think it's hard because it's difficult to understand your emotions, especially when you don't know what's actually bothering you.
Also, when you mental illness, and if you compare it to having a physical illness, for example, if you break your leg,
you go to the doctor, they take an x-ray, and they can, physically see, oh, like this is what's wrong, and you'll be in a cast for this many weeks or this many months, and then you do physical therapy, and then they give you like a time frame where, like, okay, it's going to take like this long to heal, and after that, like, you'll be good to go. But with mental health, it's completely different because you can't see when people are like suffering. You can't look inside their heads and see, oh, like this person is really anxious or depressed. So a lot of the time, people kind of just ignore it. And the only the only real person who knows exactly what's going on is yourself, and that can be really hard because you might not know how to get help, like how to help yourself. And it's also like taking that step to get help is really hard because you have to acknowledge that I am dealing with something, and it is really, really hard. But once you take that first step and once you like get help, then people around you will start to see, okay, like he's having a hard time, so let's do everything to support them.
I think everything you guys said, I completely agree with. The other thing that I just wanted to chime in with was the fact that, for the majority of us, our arms, my arms work like your arms, my legs work like your legs, but my brain does not work like your brain. And so I think that that's hard sometimes to remember, that our brains are different and they don't all work the same way, and that's why it's harder for people to understand mental health and mental illnesses. How does social media serve as a mental health stressor?
So social media has become more of a brewing spot for a lot of stereotypes and insecurities, and that's because most social media is run by the concept of getting likes and views. And when you see other students, peers, or even celebrities posting in a certain way or looking in a certain way, some people might feel insecure because they don't look like that, and that's kind of what's getting popular. And this can cause people to either feel negative about themselves by their growing insecurities, or even drive them to take action. And for example, like editing photos and making yourself look like something else. It's just a lack of self-love and insecurity, which is just a major stressor which social media contributes to.
I'll just add that what Zara said, I think I would add that all of our experience of emotion and all of our, basically our whole nervous system is deeply, deeply social. That we're wired, again, you can think about the social and mental evolution of humans, that we're wired to connect and to have a belonging. And I think sometimes the way that we use, I know the way I use social media, sometimes is a little bit more so about me, or I see things about other people that don't have relational context, especially if it's not someone that I regularly hang out with in my immediate social circle. So my social brain is trying to get social cues and trying to compare how I'm doing with how an influencer is doing, how someone else is doing, but I don't have that sense of belonging. We share food together, we hang out together, we go to school together. All that stuff is divorced, and I'm just getting triggers from this social media account.
How can someone better manage mental health with school and extracurriculars?
So this is more of something that's in your control when it comes to like schools and extracurriculars. So I would advise when choosing your classes, you guys know yourself better than anyone else, and you should take the classes that you know you can keep up with. And you can learn how difficult classes can be by talking to your friends who are in those classes, or even just like looking it up online. But if you are pressured to take specific classes, maybe from your parents or the whole competitive environment around you, the best thing you can do, going back to your coping strategies, is making some sort of to-do list or organizer so you can organize yourself well enough. And the same that goes for your extracurricular activities. What helped me a lot was that every weekend on Friday after school, I would open my notes app and write down all the homework I needed, when it was due, any projects and their due date in the next week, as well as any extracurricular work I had for any clubs. And obviously this might not work for everyone, but it's really up to you guys to find a system that works for you to be organized. And it's a huge help when it comes to maintaining your school, your homework, and your extracurriculars while taking care of your mental health.
Why is crying looked down upon, and what are the benefits of crying?
I think crying is often seen as a sign of weakness because people are not really used to being vulnerable. And I think crying is actually better for you because you can finally release those emotions that you've been bottling up. And by releasing them, you can have a better understanding of what you're dealing with.
Also, it's it's a really bad stigma and stereotype that guys are not allowed to cry, or that if they show any vulnerability, then they're seen as, weak and not strong. And that's really sad because that's not true at all. And so I think people need to recognize more that any emotion that anybody feels is valid, and it doesn't matter who they are or what their background is, their identity. None of that matters because at the end of the day, they're people, and people experience emotions. That's what makes us, humans. So it's just really important to validate everybody's experiences.
Why do people view suicide as a solution during difficult times?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that people can sometimes misunderstand, we were talking about misunderstanding mental illness earlier. If I haven't maybe experienced a suicidal thought or haven't been close to someone that's thinking or feeling about those things, I may have a lot of stigma about that towards that person. It may be hard for me to understand. But from just learning from the young people and adults that have suicidal thoughts or chronic suicidality, they're often telling us that they have a really high level of internal suffering. And so if we can be empathetic towards that person, we might say, oh, if your day-to-day life has a really high level of suffering, of course you would experience momentary relief when thinking about your life ending. So it's, for some of these folks, the coping side of thinking about suicide is to think about their suffering being over. We can have a lot of empathy for folks that have a high level of suffering, like the students on the panel would say earlier, if you had something that was a visual marker of your suffering, people would say, oh my gosh, your leg, oh wow, your arm, that looks like it hurts so much, how are you so strong? But when someone has internal or mental and emotional suffering, they're not getting the validation, and they feel like other people are suffering, which may be true, so they're feeling more isolated. That multiplies their experience of suffering. So the more we can talk about this kind of invisible suffering for folks, the more we're de-isolating and supporting them. We should quickly say that we don't recommend thinking about suicide as a coping strategy. It serves that function in immediacy for people who are suffering a lot, but it gradually erodes their sense of efficacy. I can do something about my situation, their sense of self-esteem, I'm a worthwhile person. Whereas other coping skills on that positive list we talked about earlier, and another list that you'll see in a few slides, those are things that build up my sense of efficacy. I can do something about my situation, or my sense of self-esteem, worthiness, or even my sense of belonging and connection to others.
I think one thing I want to add to everything that you said, Bob, on this slide is the fact that if you all have friends that share with you that they're thinking about hurting themselves or thinking about taking their life or they're having suicidal ideation, you need to tell an adult, whether that is your parents, a teacher here in the building, coming to school counseling. If you're concerned about a friend, you need to partner with an adult because
we can help. And like Bob said, oftentimes they don't want to die. They're seeking a very permanent solution to a very temporary situation, and they're asking for help. They don't really want to die. They want that pain, that emotional pain to end. How can I find help for a friend going through a mental illness? Or how can I help a friend going through mental illness?
This is a question I can kind of relate to because during my sophomore year, which was COVID year, we had online school, I was kind of a mess with a lot of stress and a lack of like interaction with people. And to answer it firstly, I guess you guys have to understand that some people are closer to some people, like other people, rather than another set of people. And your friend may feel comfortable speaking to some people, but isn't comfortable enough to open up to other people. So you have to understand that this friend may not be comfortable speaking to you, or they are comfortable speaking to you. I, on the other hand, when I was struggling with stress back then, I just posted a picture of myself crying on Snap, like on my private story, and I never even like responded to people who would like ask if I was okay. Don't do that because it doesn't really help. I personally wish I communicated more with my closer friends because I feel like that would have helped me get a lot of frustration out. But again, I do want to emphasize that different people prefer different coping mechanisms like we saw earlier, and talking might be hard. So this is just one way you can help understand them well enough, and you can know, if you know what could help them and what could be a trigger to them, and you're close to them, I feel like communication is a big step forward to helping them out.
I think it's also important to note, though, that your friend or a family member that's going through a hard time and struggling with their mental health, obviously you want to do everything that you can, to help them, whether it's just letting them vent to you or just being a shoulder to cry on and stuff, and that's, that's good. But you also have to keep in mind that you also have a certain amount, like, there's only so much that you can do for your friend. And sometimes you can it's hard, like, hearing about your friend's struggle, it's a hard thing to listen to. And sometimes it can affect your own mental health, especially if what they're going through is very intense. You sometimes feel like it's your job to help them, to make them better, but you're only one person, and you yourself you have to take care of yourself too, and if it's starting to affect you and drain you, then sometimes it's good to take a step back or to tell an adult and say, hey, like, my friend, they're getting, they're not getting better, or they're getting worse, and I can't, help them, and just having like an adult or like a professional person reach out to them and help them is so much more better than you trying to do it, and you end up like hurting yourself in the process, or even damaging the relationship, because sometimes you can't do it, and that's okay. Like, you're not meant to say that person can help them, but there's only so much that you can do yourself.
I love that, Rakiba, and I think that kind of, for me, emphasizes the difference between helping and solving, or helping and fixing. The role of specialists and health professionals like Ms. Beal and myself is super important, but I also think sometimes a friend who can say something like, I don't know what to say, I just care about you, I don't know what to say, but I'm worried about you. Are you open to opening up with me? It doesn't mean that I have to be the one person in their life that they're opening up to, or that I have to have an answer for what they're experiencing. But I'm a social worker, y'all, and that's my training. So I'm always ready to go social, and I really think that isolation as a multiplier of suffering is something we can do something about. We're wired to be social, we're wired for love and belonging, and for someone to say, I'm concerned for you, I'd like to talk to Ms. Beeland, or to encourage this person, here's some other resources that maybe they do things I can't do, but I'm always happy to listen. That kind of connection instantly pulls the isolation down. So it's taking the multiplier out of the equation for that person and helping them know that someone sees them and is going to notice them.
How can teachers help students with their mental health?
So I first want to say teachers will help you, and all it takes is just like one step to talk to them. Personally, I was feeling tired or not prepared enough for a test or a quiz, and that was just like stressing me out. I talked to my teachers ahead of time, and I let them know. And from then, it's just like working with them to reschedule that test or quiz, and working to improve study habits or just like sleep schedules, and really just stuff like that. And all it takes is that first step to simply ask and explain what's happening. And there's sometimes when you're not comfortable enough speaking with a specific teacher, and I would say to reach out to your own counselor if that's the case, because they can help you out with that and help make sure that you're ready for your tests and quizzes without having to feel stressed about it.
I'll chime in on that, because as she said, if you need help with getting assistance from your teachers, coming to your counselor, we don't tell your teachers anything that you don't give us permission to tell them. So if you have a lot going on at home, you have a lot going on at home. And I can simply send an email or talk to them and be like, hey, can you give that student a little bit of extra time, grace, they're going through something right now. That's as much as we tell them. And communication is key to all of this. So in summary, we understand that life can be challenging, especially as you navigate the ups and downs of high school. And along with all the good times, there definitely comes some bad times as well. But there's always ways to cope with any negative emotions that may arise. Learning how to take care of yourself right now in high school is so important. To come up with a self-care plan, because you will graduate and you will go out into the real world, and life continues to be a roller coaster ride, and there continues to be ups and downs. And knowing how to navigate life and being able to handle those curveballs is so, so important. So just like we sit here and tell you guys, you need to be able to handle the stress in your life. You have to have positive coping strategies. You have to have people in your life that you can talk to. That holds true for Bob and I, and all of the teachers and all of the other professionals here in the school building. So our hope is that we can give you tools to put in your toolbox to know how to handle your mental health as you go forward. So here are some realistic ways that you can improve your mental health. Having a strong support system with people that you can be authentic with. Who can you be the most vulnerable with that will have your back no matter what? They're going to listen, they're going to be not judgmental. And it doesn't mean you have to have 10 people in your life that can be. 1, 2, 3. You don't need a lot, but you have to have a few people that you can be your true, authentic self with, and that they are comfortable enough in saying, hey, what's going on? I noticed this, and that's not okay. Giving you feedback on how to be better and being your best self that you can be. Doing some self-reflection. And for some people, that's journaling. That is not my thing. I have a whole lot of mental conversations that go on in my head to reevaluate maybe a conversation that I've had, walk away from it. Oh, maybe I didn't handle that well. How can I handle that better? Things like that. Give yourself pep talks. Have a medical professional that you can talk to. For some people, that's just your pediatrician or your general practitioner doctor. For other people, that's a therapist. And therapy is a really good thing if you need that. I recently had a conversation with someone, and they're like, oh, I've been in therapy since I was like 8. There's a difference between being in therapy at 8 versus being in therapy at your age, you guys. At your age, you guys can help start to navigate what is it that I want to achieve out of therapy. What are my goals through therapy? Do I want to be able to manage the stress in my life? Do I want to have a better relationship with my friends? Do I want to wake up and feel happy and be able to find joy in my life again? So what are your goals if you are pursuing that? And then, Sarah, did you want to finish up?
I wanted to cover the whole maintaining your health aspect, specifically like sleep and nutrition. As for sleep, your bodies follow a natural 24-hour clock, which some of you guys may know as a circadian rhythm. It wants to sleep when it's nighttime and be awake when it's daytime. And staying up late at night and disrupting that rhythm will make you groggy and tired. And this phenomenon kind of reportedly affects 16% of teenagers. And if you're a student juggling all these responsibilities and homework at the same time as staying up late at night, it's just going to hurt your mental health more. And you need to take a step to actually take care of your sleep cycle and sleep early at night and be able to wake up at a comfortable time for you. As for your nutrition, it's scientifically proven that having an insufficient diet is going to damage your mental health. And when we feel down, we usually rely on sugary foods for that temporary satisfaction, but your brain needs to eat and it won't just fill itself on like ice cream or anything else of the sort. So eating like nutrient-dense food like fruits, vegetables, or even seafood is just a huge help for your brain's strength. It has the vitamins necessary to keep your brain functioning this whole time. So if you guys really want to take care of yourselves, you guys can take small steps like sleeping earlier or trying to maintain a balanced diet, which will help you out a lot more.
There's this statistic, there's research that's been done, I find this absolutely fascinating. If you are sleep deprived, the likelihood that you will have a depressive episode goes up by 40%. That's huge. 40% if you're sleep deprived. So if you're like, nope, gotta stay up late, gotta get all this homework done, etc. and so on. I am a huge napper, I'm a supporter of napper, go home and take a nap. Set your alarm, give yourself a 20-minute power nap. The amount you will then be able to get done with that work, that schoolwork, that reading, huge. So that's a big one for me. Take a nap.
We'd like to thank you all for coming. That's that QR code I was talking about for you guys to verify you were here. I once again want to emphasize that this event was made possible through the Equity Ambassadors chapter at Deep Run. Equity Ambassadors is a county organization that has chapters in each school, and they focus on having equity, diversity, and opportunity within all their schools and do activities to maintain that equity, diversity, and opportunity. So if you guys would like to join Equity Ambassadors next year, if you're not a senior, look out next year for a flyer or a ticket that will explain what Equity Ambassadors is and instructions to join.